Hi, Nomads. Today on A Fool and His Money Are Soon Parted, a slight pivot on MLMs. Shout out to Mike Corbell, who was kind enough to have me on the Invictus podcast, of which he is the host, where we discussed participation in an MLM. And based on that discussion, I came to a realization that there is, in fact, a an individual, a type of individual, I will say like an avatar, if you will, who would be ideal for participation in an MLM. And I want to construct that for you in the form of a short talk. Here's the obligatory preface. No nomad, past, present, and future is meant to be impugned character-wise or any-wise by this information, which is meant to entertain, edify, hopefully to warn off anyone who is being recruited by an MLM recruiter, and perhaps to persuade you to terminate your efforts in an MLM because the likelihood that you're going to succeed is very small. The odds are stacked against you. So a quick review again of what are the elements of an MLM company. First of all, they are based on the endless chain recruiting model, which assumes neither market saturation nor the ordinary laws of supply and demand. Another feature that is universal, pay to play. You must pay your employer in order to take on this commission-only 1099 contract position, from which you can be fired at any moment for any reason or no reason at all. The only way that one can actually make money in an MLM, and this is completely and totally the focus of today's talk, is that you must recruit and recruit heavily other distributors who are also customers. In fact, there is an extremely close identity between distributor and customer in an MLM. And then finally, this concept of extreme money transfer, which we're not going to belabor, but if you are considering a business model that will make you a lot of money fast, consider starting an MLM. Actually, don't do that, but that's what extreme money transfer is all about. So let me first start with a brief discussion of who would not be a good candidate for an MLM. And I'm going to borrow a term from medicine. Contraindications are lists of facts, conditions, situations that would militate against a decision to do something like a surgical procedure, for example. And an absolute contraindication is a hard stop. This person has condition X, and by no means should this person have the surgery. So what would an absolute contraindication for participation in an MLM be? And that is need for money. Or another way to put that would be this person cannot afford to lose money. Why? Because 100% of people who get involved in MLMs will lose money, at least initially. And the data are solid to suggest that the overwhelming majority, in the high 90s of percents, will in fact lose money or break even. So if you are in the category where you can't afford to roll those dice, participation in an MLM is absolutely contraindicated for you. So, are absolute contraindications the only kinds of contraindications? Of course, no. There are relative contraindications, which can be thought of as features that might weigh in your decision against doing a surgical procedure or getting involved in an MLM. And what are some of those relative contraindications for MLM? Well, if you have few or no friends or family, might not be a good idea. You should know that in 100% of every MLM that you might get involved with, you are going to be asked, persuaded, cajoled, and otherwise coerced into recruiting the friends and family that you've got. So if you got none, this might not be a good choice for you. Now, contacts or friends on social media. I don't know what the ideal number is, but it's probably more than you've got. Opinions about this differ, but I can say from only empirical evidence, which was not scientifically gathered, that those who did succeed in climbing up the ladder and doing more than breaking even in MLM had friends lists, contacts lists in the thousands. Here's another relative contraindication, which is going to figure prominently in 2 slides from now, and that is a full-time job, and I'm going to explain why. And sort of a version of this is if you've got limited time, because to really succeed, you're going to need more than just limited time. Let me return to this issue of why a full-time job is a relative contraindication, and it refers to what I refer to the catch-22 of MLM. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the phrase catch-22 and aren't aware of where that phrase comes from, it was a novel by Joseph Heller, which I confess I never read all the way through. It was in my home growing up. I read the first chapter or the first couple chapters and abandoned it. I did, however, watch the films based on the movie, the first starring Alan Arkin and the second starring George Clooney. Both are excellent. If I had to give the nod from one to the other, it's a real tough, folks, but it comes down on, I would say, watch the first version, not the remake, the one with Alan Arkin. It's terrific. So the catch-22 that Joseph Heller wrote about was the following. So if you were in the Air Force, you cannot fly combat missions if you're crazy. But you can't refer yourself for a mental evaluation because it's rational to be afraid to go into to combat missions. So the catch-22 is if you refer yourself for a mental evaluation, you're sane. So you shouldn't even refer yourself. So here's the catch-22 for MLM. If you have a full-time job and you want to start working for an MLM part-time, which, by the way, is the only rational way to approach this opportunity, you should know the following, that you can't succeed if you don't put in a full-time effort. As Dave Ramsey says, nights and weekends, and I would add vacations, and worse. I mean, there are documented cases of individuals who have almost bragged, but have certainly normalized. Let's dispense with the pejoratives. Have normalized, for example, working their MLM on their wedding day. There's another famous case of a woman who was sitting on the toilet experiencing a miscarriage and recruiting. And this type of intense, nonstop nights and weekends recruiting activity is normalized. So here's the thing. We have narrowed who the ideal candidate would be, because you have to have a full-time job, but you really need to work 2 full-time jobs. You can't do MLM part-time and succeed. Why? Excuse me. Because you need to put in a full-time effort to succeed. So who is the ideal candidate? And such people do exist. First, this is an individual who has money to spend or lose, who has loads of time, who has a large family and friend group. That's certainly going to increase your chances, including a social media following in the thousands. Folks, if you do not meet these criteria, don't join an MLM. That's all I've got for you. I will see you in the next episode.